Hi everyone, my name is Bill and I'm standing at the South Rim entrance to the Grand Canyon National Park. The Grand Canyon became a national park by act of Congress in February of 1919. So that means this year it's celebrating its 100th birthday. And what better way to celebrate a momentous anniversary than to experience it up close, personal, from the top to the bottom. So I invite you to join me and some of my wacky friends as we take the path less traveled in what we call the Grand Canyon Centennial Misadventure. The Grand Canyon is one of my favorite parks. There are 61 national parks in our country, and I've had the opportunity to visit 16 of them. And of the 16, the Grand Canyon is the only park that I visited more than once. Now, what is about the Grand Canyon? Well, I saw a video when I was just a kid about the Grand Canyon, was always fascinated with it. It's not the oldest national park, that would be Yellowstone National Park. It's not the largest national park. Shoot, there are 7 national parks in Alaska alone that are larger than the Grand Canyon. It doesn't have the most visitors each year. That would be the Great Smoky Mountain National Park in Tennessee and North Carolina. But what the Grand Canyon has, it's got that wow moment when you step to the edge and you look over and you say, wow. After a cold night at Mather Campground, morning arrived. We broke camp, ate breakfast, and prepared to begin our hike. We'd been keeping an eye on the weather forecast in the weeks leading up to our hike, and it had changed in the last few days prior to our arrival. So everyone was making a change in what clothing they had in their backpacks, which meant we were late in leaving. I had the opportunity to pick up a couple of the loaded backpacks of my fellow hikers, and I was excited because of the steps I'd taken to lighten my load this year. The reason I'm excited about this year's trip is because I've made a real effort to lower my pack weight. Backpackers talk about base weight of the pack. And now the base weight is anything that is not consumable. So that's the pack, the sleeping system, the tent, the clothing that I might wear, and the gears. Well, we're going to do a little experiment today, and we're going to alter that. Definition slightly. We're going to just compare the backpack weight, the sleeping system weight, and the weight of the tent, and you'll see how it's changed over the 3 years that I've done this. Now, the first year I went, it was kind of like that old wedding adage: something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. So I borrowed some things, I bought some things, I had some things already in stock. I hadn't been backpacking in over 35 years, so as you can imagine, equipment back then is quite different than it is now. So I borrowed this pack from a friend of mine named Dwayne. And it's a great pack. It's an Eddie Bauer pack. I have no idea the capacity of it, but thank you, Dwayne, for allowing me to use that. That worked out real well. I also borrowed a sleeping pad from him. Now, this isn't the exact one, but it's a lot like it. I had a sleeping bag myself. It's something that I used for church camp for years, but it wasn't bad. I thought I'll try this, and then I began to think about what it's rated, because I had no idea what the temperature rating was in this backpack. So I decided then that I needed something else. So I bought a sleeping bag liner just to make sure. I'm glad I had it because it was a little cooler than this sleeping bag would have carried by myself. And finally, I purchased this tent from Amazon. Actually, it wound up coming from Walmart.com. Now, all this together weighed 17 pounds and 2 ounces. And but my loaded weight that year was 43 pounds. So you can see that well over half of the weight of the pack was in food, was in clothing, various equipment, cameras, things like that I took. So I determined that if I went again, that I was going to have to make some changes. And I had such a great time that I decided I had to do it again. So the next year, we were able to get our own pack. I was able to get my own sleeping bag, thanks to the generosity of my wife and of my choir. And so I kept the same tent. I brought this sleeping bag, this backpack. It's an Osprey Ether 60, however you pronounce it. It's a great fitting pack. I love it. It carries really well. And I also bought me a new sleeping bag. This is a North Face Cat's Meow, rated at 20 degrees, and it's really warm and comfy in cold temperatures. I slept in it a year ago at Bryce Canyon, was down in the mid-20s at night, and just slept as toasty and warm as possible. So that's a great pack. Now, then also, as part of that, I got a new sleeping pad. It's an REI Flash air pad. I bought a pillow, and I bought a little pump. Kept the same tent, and so these things together were 15.3 pounds. So, I lost a couple of pounds, but in actuality, my pack weight, including water, was 35 pounds. So I dropped 8 pounds from the previous year. So I was learning how to pack. I was learning what I didn't need, and so that made it a little easier. But this year I thought I would try something different. This year I decided, after watching some videos, that I needed to make some other changes. And there were a couple of things that led to this change. One is I bought this guy right here as a day pack. Now this is an REI Trail 40. I bought it to, as I say, as a day pack, as a carry-on on airlines. It's a great pack. I was watching videos about some of these thru hikers, and I realized that they were carrying packs that were smaller than this. Now there's an old adage in automobile racing that says speed costs money, how fast do you want to go? Well, that could also, you can alter it a little bit and say lightness costs money, how light do you want to go? So I didn't want to go as light as some of those people, but I had this nice little 40-liter pack, which, obviously 2/3 the size of my Osprey pack. And I began to think of some other ways that I could lose some weight. Now, one of the things that I discovered in the canyon with the North Face Cat's Meow sleeping bag was it was too warm. I just could not get comfortable. It would get down in the low 50s at night, and that sleeping bag is way too warm for a 50-degree night. So I thought maybe it's time to change. So this year I went and I bought an REI Igneo downfield sleeping bag. Now, it's lighter. One of the other things about it, because it is down, it compresses and gets into a whole lot smaller area than the fiber-filled North Face bag. So I made that change, and then I decided that I needed to make a couple of the changes. Just a tarp cut down, a 2 mil tarp cut down for my footprint, and a Big Agnes Fly Creek HV tent. So these together weighed 9 pounds and 8 ounces. So I've almost cut my pack weight in half from my first trip. So 17.2, 15.3, and now 9.8. Ultimately, I made my choice based on back-to-back 4-mile hikes a few weeks before we left. First, I hiked with the REI 40-liter pack with my tent, sleeping system, and water. Then I hiked the same trails with my Osprey 60-liter pack containing the same items. The Osprey weighed only 2 pounds more than the REI pack, but it carried everything so much better, and it left room in my pack for any additional items that I might need. Although I had the gate code to drive our personal vehicles to the trailhead, I just couldn't be sure that there would be sufficient parking, so we made the decision to ride the shuttle, which put us even further behind schedule. Once we boarded the shuttle, we made every stop until we finally reached the Hermit's Trail trailhead. And although it was a beautiful sunshiny day, it was what you might call cool and brisk. Instead of days in the upper 60s and lower 70s that we'd been anticipating, we'd be hiking in the low to mid 50s. And instead of nights in the low to mid 40s, we'd have lows in the mid to high 20s. Once we finally got off the bus, we took the obligatory group photo, and then we were off. Spirits were high as we finally began our hike.
Y'all seen the movie Lone Survivor? That's where you're going down if you complain too much, like when they kept
I'm gonna ask a
tumbling.
stupid question. Are we sure this is the trail?
No, I'm not sure at all.
Okay, I just wanted to ask because I didn't actually see something.
The beginning of the trail did not prepare us for the difficulties that lay below. This trail is actually, as most trails in the Grand Canyon, was probably formed first by Native Americans. I do know from reading that the Hermit's Trail was used by horse thieves as they either were moving their ill-gotten gain from one rim to the other. Right after the turn of the 20th century, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway took over all of the recreational activities, I guess you could say, of the Grand Canyon. And they had one of their subsidiaries came in, surveyed, and laid out and rebuilt this trail, I should say, to make it much easier to use. Because they then built a place called Hermit's Camp further down the trail, and they had luxury tents, they had electricity, they had telephones there, and the people would pay to either hike down, but they would usually ride mules down to the to Hermit's Camp. They even had an aerial tramway at one time for people to go up and down this part of the canyon. But eventually it did become a national park, and the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway Company then had to remove all of the things that had fallen into disrepair. So this trail is not well maintained by the National Park Service. This is what's called a threshold trail. The three main trails are the North Kaibab, of course, on the north rim, the South Kaibab, and Bright Angel. And they lead down to the bottom. They're maintained. All three of those trails are navigated on a regular basis by the mules that take supplies up and down. So this trail is a little too rough for that. There will be sections of it will be real nice. Other sections will have to do a little scrambling. But they named the trail after a man named Louis D. Boucher. I'll tell you more about Louis later on. The fork in the trail between Boucher Trail and Hermit's Trail. And the interesting thing is that they're both named for the same man. Louis D. Boucher, who was a French Canadian, moved west to become a gold prospector, ultimately wound up here in the Grand Canyon, did copper mining, also ran mules for the railroad up and down to bring paying patrons to Hermit's Camp. You can see how much rockier this path is than the main corridor paths. I'm just glad we're going down it and not up it. But I think that we're probably going to make a lot slower time than what we had hoped to today. Interesting crew of guys that are with us. I'll introduce you to them later on. This started about 4 years ago with a coworker and I talking about a bucket list thing we'd like to do, and it was to hike and backpack into the Grand Canyon. So 3 years ago we were able to do just that. And then the next year we came back and we were able to hike rim to rim. So this year, since it is the Centennial of the National Park, it just seemed like a good idea to come back, and we wanted to hike something different, something a little more challenging. So a little research led us to settle on Hermit Trail, and ultimately we'll meet up with Tonto Trail, and then finally back on Bright Angel to the top. But this should be the most difficult part of the trail that we hike this week. You can see at the slow pace that Rodney and Jim are making that this is a rough trail, and you get on a rough trail with really inconsistent distances that you have to step down. You put that together with a 35-pound backpack, and you just have to kind of take it easy. I suppose it's only natural that with 9 hikers, we would soon gravitate to groups that hiked at our own pace. And sure enough, soon we were hiking in 3 separate groups. Who are the guys on the hike with me? Well, this is Rodney, one of my very best friends for the past 32 years. I've had the opportunity to work with him on 2 different occasions. We're like brothers. We argue all the time, and we always try to outdo each other in whatever we're involved in. This is Lynn, and I've known Lynn longer than Rodney. We served in sister churches in Texas in the late 70s. I moved in 1980 and lost contact with him, but I ran into him again in 2016 when he joined a group called the Singing Men of Texas, a group that I was already a part of. This is Mike, and I've known Mike longer than I've known Lynn. We were both members of the Oklahoma Singing Churchmen for a couple of years right after I graduated from college. But we really didn't know each other too well. Mike's a bass and I'm a tenor, and we sat on the opposite ends of the choir for those 2 years. It wasn't until I moved to Stillwater, Oklahoma, where Mike was already serving, that we became really great friends. This is Larry. Larry's a member of my church, and he made the Rim to Rim trip with us in 2017. He's a bit of a fitness nut, having owned several workout facilities until selling them just a few years ago. This is my friend J.K. I've known J.K. for about the last 10 years. Like Lynn and I, he's a member of the Singing Men of Texas. He heard me talking about a previous trip to the Grand Canyon, and he expressed an interest in going if I ever went again. Well, we had an opening, I invited him, and he was able to go. This is James, and like Larry, James is a member of my church. I've known him for over 23 years. His wife, who I work with, thought he might be interested in going, so I extended the invitation. He accepted, and glad he did. This is Gary, and Gary is the only member of the group that I did not know beforehand. He's a father to Mike's son-in-law. I'm glad he wanted to go. He's a great guy, and it was a pleasure to spend a little time with him. And this is Jim. Jim is another acquaintance from church. He's a retired coach. And like me 3 years earlier, hiking the Grand Canyon was kind of a bucket list thing for him. So at the last minute, he was able to get the gear and go with us. The Hermit's Trail follows a trail constructed by the Santa Fe Railroad in 1912. It was abandoned in 1931, but it's pretty easy to follow, with the exception of several rock slides on what is called the Supai Traverse. As I mentioned earlier, the trail is named for a French-Canadian man named Louis de Brochet. Louis made his way west during the Canadian Gold Rush to make his fortune. He became familiar with the use of mules for transportation and gear hauling, and after a failed stint of gold prospecting, he turned his attention to the southwest, seeking silver, eventually working his way to the area now known as Arizona, sometime around 1889. Found work as a Grand Canyon guide for the Hans Ranch, where he provided mule rides for canyon visitors. In 1891, he decided to stake his own claim in the Grand Canyon, settling near Dripping Springs Basin, which provided a natural spring of fresh water to the canyon. Built a camp for himself and a corral for his mules and sheep. Living in such an isolated area earned him the nickname the Hermit. And even though he was considered an eccentric, he was also very sociable, opening his home to visitors that might be passing through. Well, we're getting pretty spread out right now. None of us are early spring chickens, and one of our late additions is pretty slow. So a couple of our guys are being awfully accommodating, and they're hiking with him and making sure he can get through these sections like this. Now this is what you kind of call scrambling. You can see the rocks and stuff. This trail has been torn up by rock slides. I was with the guys that are hiking slower, but I am the one with the permit, and so probably I need to be there as quickly as possible, because the game rangers will come by, and park rangers will come by and want to see our permit, make sure we're all legal. So I decided to go ahead and I'm not going to catch the others, but I'm hiking substantially faster than the last three.